Healthcare is too expensive. Employers are offsetting costs onto their employees. Who will make health benefits affordable for hard-working Americans and their families?
You will! This is the Empowering Plans Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you once again emphasize the benefits in your benefit plan. Now prepare to learn,
Plan,
save,
and protect with the Phia Group.
Welcome, everyone, to a very, very special edition of the Empowering Plans podcast. My name is Corey Crigger, and I am joined today by the sensational Cindy Merrell. Cindy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Corey. How are you?
Well, I couldn't be doing any better, and I think we all know why. This is the third annual Phia Derby Preview podcast coming live from Louisville, Kentucky. I don't know what would give it away, me in a tie or Cindy in that hat, but I do think that whatever we had to pay to get the Empowering Plans podcast on video has been well worth it just for this edition of the Empowering Plans podcast. For those of you who are not watching, I'm going to describe Cindy's outfit. She has a beautiful fascinator that is 7 to 9 different colors of magenta green to purple. And it is a perfect derby outfit. And we are so excited to be with you guys today for the Empowering Plans podcast. But we cannot have an Empowering Plans podcast without talking a little bit about a couple things going on within the industry today. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the first half of this episode. We're going to talk about two topics that are really high on our watch list, which is a case in front of the Supreme Court right now involving Roundup and kind of our mass tort products. Cindy's going to talk about that. And then a bombshell New York Times article dropped at the end of last week around the No Surprises Act. So we're going to talk about those two things up front. And then we're going to get to the reason why we're all here. We're going to pick horses and we're going to talk about the Derby. But Cindy, let's get our Phia contractual obligations out of the way to use this platform. Let's talk about something substantive. You were telling me a little bit this week about this Roundup case. Why don't you tell the listeners about it?
Sure. And I just have to say that I'm impressed by our ability to get two of my favorite things into one episode that are completely polar opposite, some subrogation and some horses all into one. So this is definitely going to be a very special podcast. So I'm excited about it.
What if you get hit by someone else's horse and your health plan pays for it? That would be a great question.
Now that would be very interesting. And we definitely would have to get another podcast on that one. But so this week, on Monday, the Supreme Court heard arguments in a case that we've been watching very closely because for those of you who don't know, Phia has a mass tort program. And when I say the word and the terms mass tort, what I'm talking about is not necessarily the legal definition of a mass tort. And it's more just, it's a broad program that we have when it involves any kind of toxic tort or any of these other things, common things that you've probably heard of. The Johnson & Johnson talc is a really widely known one. And I'm sure some of you have seen the commercials on TV for maybe like Camp Lejeune. So that would be another, when I say mass tort, that's what I'm talking about today. But what we heard on Monday, and this speaks to our team, because we were watching it as if it was like the Super Bowl. Our team was watching the arguments in front of the Supreme Court on Monday about a specific case called it's Monsanto versus Darnell. And this, although is not typically falling under a mass tort because it's actually a single case, it's going to have wide impacts across all of our mass tort program. Because it involves the Roundup weed killer. And for those of you who don't know, for about a decade now, there has been a claim, hundreds of thousands of claims alleging that Monsanto's product of Roundup actually may have caused cancer. And more specifically, one of the claims is about non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So let me back up to Monday's arguments. What the court was hearing about was a case for the individual, the claimant is Josh Darnell. and he's a Missouri resident. And he alleges that he used Roundup for many, many years, and the product has caused him to suffer from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. More specifically, it's not just the product Roundup, it's an active ingredient. It's called glyphosate. And there's a lot of dispute whether or not this particular active ingredient actually is linked to the cancer. And a Missouri court heard this Mr. Darnell's case and ultimately awarded him $1.25 million in damages. And one of his claims is that Monsanto failed to warn consumers that Roundup could pose a cancer risk on its labels. So it's a failure to warn argument. And he won, Mr. Darnell won in the lower courts. And Monsanto took this up to the Supreme Court, and because their position is that the federal insecticide, fungicide, and rodenticide. Now, guys, I have to tell you all, I have been practicing how to say rodenticide for longer than I want to admit in preparation for today. But it's also known as the FIFRA Act. If it preempts state law's failure to warn claims, when the EPA, and like the federal agency, the EPA, has approved the pesticide label without the cancer warnings, can a state jury, nonetheless find the manufacturer label liable for not providing such a warning of the failure to warn the cause or cancer impacts? And I have to tell you, Monday was very interesting. Sometimes when you're listening to the justices, you can kind of get an idea of where they're going with it, where their line of questioning is set to a certain cadence, and you have a pretty good idea where they might come out. This one was wild, and it was so entertaining for us nerds that are all in this, because we had, Justice Roberts, who's typically a more conservative justice. He was asking some questions that made you think, well, maybe he might find in favor of Mr. Darnell. And then we had some other justices that were asking some questions that made you think that, well, that was surprising. Maybe they might be thinking Monsanto is correct in this, so that the FIFRA does preempt any kind of state law. So what we're waiting at the edge of our seats right now to find out how this case will be decided by the Supreme Court, because this case, although while it's only one single case, it will have some impacts on our mass tort program for the Roundup cases, because it will just limit or take off the table the failure to warn claims. Now, this is not an end-all be-all. It doesn't kill all of the other arguments and claims that have been made. It's just kind of may reduce some of the potential claims that a plaintiff can make in these Roundup cases. So we are definitely on the edge of our seats waiting to hear and find out how the court may decide. So that was very exciting. I have to tell you, Corey, though, I have never been so excited to watch SCOTUS. And we even had like a team chat with everybody's reactions while we're watching it live. So goes to show you, here at Phia, we are very passionate about what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course we are. We have to be, because of the industry we're in. And I'll just add on to that. Glyphosate is going to be in the headlines regardless of this Supreme Court case. For those of you who have been following the Empowering Plans podcast for a little while, if you remember, when this administration first came in, Ron Peck and I did a podcast about the Make America Healthy Again movement and some of the initiative that RFK Jr. was going to push as kind of the head of his department there. And one of the big things that he has been talking about for a long time, for well before he was ever appointed to his cabinet position, is the impact that glyphosate has on the food supply and the food chain. And it just so happens that in the current farm bill, the current version of the farm bill that's being debated in Congress right now, there is currently a provision in it that is granting immunity to pesticide companies for the use of glyphosate, to bar claims against glyphosate use. The science is disputed is probably the safest way for me to say that, on whether or not glyphosate does indeed cause cancer, but it is really fracturing the Republican majority right now. This immunity that's in the Farm Bill, and there's a lot of Democratic support to remove that portion as well. Thomas Massey, representative from Kentucky, is opposing the immunity clause on the Republican side, as well as Anna Paula Luna from Florida. So those are two big Maha Republicans, and they are pushing back on this. So glyphosate, there's going to be more to come on that, and more to come on this case as we monitor it to be able to provide the best services that we can to our clients there. Shifting gears just a little bit to the No Surprises Act, because that is the one topic that will not go away, cannot go away, can't stop, won't stop. It's the NSA. A pretty big New York Times article came out April 22nd, written by Sarah Cliff, who is an excellent investigative journalist in the healthcare space. And, I'm not going to go through the whole New York Times article. What I will say is that all the anecdotal evidence that our clients are bringing to us about it feels like the system's weighted against us. We can't understand what some of these offers are, why providers are getting away with submitting these egregious billed charges over and over and over and winning. The article is pointing this out. Some things that I will point out that I think are the most egregious aspects of this article. It was forecasted by government officials. We know the government officials get things right all the time, that around 17,000 cases a year would make it into the federal IDR process. In the first half of last year, 1.2 million cases went to the IDR process. So we are talking about a massive, massive miscalculation by government officials on the volume. And I think, without speaking too stridently, it's because providers like this process. They're winning 88% of the time when a claim goes to IDR. They feel like that this is a way for them to be compensated fairly for services rendered. Now, I'm going to leave it up to the listener to determine on whether or not that is a valid claim or not. But I will point out that there are multiple cases of providers that would readily accept $20,000 for a service prior to the No Surprise Act are now submitting IDR offers at over $300,000 and winning those offers. So maybe they were criminally underpaid for all those years, or maybe not. Maybe they are looking at this as a way to increase bottom line. This is something that Phia is very passionate about. We have a No Surprise Act team that provides this kind of support. Our chief provider relations officer has met with members of the Ways and Means Committee as recently as a couple weeks ago to discuss pretty much all these things that were highlighted by this New York Times article. So we're hoping that it gets refined and that it becomes more equitable between providers and payers on outcomes, because we do think that healthcare providers should be paid fairly for services that they render, but they shouldn't have windfalls over and over and over. And that's what the IDR process feels like there. Cindy, I know that you looked at that article a little bit. Anything to add, or anything that stood out to you as egregious or shocking, or just something that you didn't know?
So I think the numbers, just the straight up statistics that she was raising, are just shocking to my conscience. Like they are, it's very surprising for that No Surprises Act to have had this kind of consequence. I do appreciate that they have enough data that I feel like they can go in there and reevaluate where are we with this, and what unintended consequences have we created. And I'm looking forward to them evaluating how they might be able to change this and make this more equitable, and have, because it's just the numbers alone, I can't get over them. I think was that 85% was one of the statistics she cited in favor of the provider. So that was pretty shocking, Corey.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's something much like the Monsanto case, something that we're going to continue to monitor, continue to update the industry on as more and more information comes out. And if you have any questions or if you need help with the way that you are handling those Surprise Act claims, you can reach out to Phia, and we will be more than happy to hop on a call, discuss with you, and see if there's any value add on our side for that. Now, with all that said, the reason that you're all tuning in today is that it is Kentucky Derby week here in Louisville, Kentucky, which means that we are going to shift gears radically from empowering health plans to empowering your wallet, because we give out winners here at the Empowering Plans podcast. I just want to take a second and just remind everyone that you shouldn't gamble more than you can afford to lose, and this is for entertainment purposes only. But with that being said, this podcast has picked a correct trifecta. Not only that, in that podcast I mentioned that Ron Peck and I did before, we both called out correctly multiple items that we thought that RFK was going to get accomplished in his first year, including banning red dye, which was one of my picks. And also, more recent history, Nick Bonds and I did a podcast in December on the drug Ibogaine, which is a psychedelic drug that had a lot of anecdotal evidence of helping with PTSD and opioid addiction. And just 2 weeks ago, there was an executive order announced that was going to increase the amount of federal funding to get more research done on the drug Ibogaine. So this podcast can read the tea leaves. Pat's a big tea drinker. He's our producer. We can read the tea leaves and we know what's coming. Cindy, do you think we have a winner that we can give out this year? I think we missed last year, but that's okay. We're still doing pretty good. Do you think we got a winner this year?
Oh, Corey, I know we do. And
That's right.
before we go too much further, can I just mention 2 years ago when Corey is saying he correctly picked the trifecta? Corey, now how much money did you make off of that one?
We can cut this part of the podcast out. I did not place the bet that I gave on the podcast, but that's okay, because like a good Phia employee, I'm worried about the listener. I'm worried about the customer. They are the ones that I want to empower. And, every now and then you just have to take a loss. And you know what? That's enough about that. Cindy, we have another year in which we're having some terrible weather during Derby week, and this seems to be a trend. Last year, the air show was canceled. Thunder over Louisville was canceled due to some historic flooding that Louisville hadn't seen in maybe 100 years or so. And then this week, we have had pretty crazy storms again. I know it got pretty bad out where you guys live. Did you make it through the tornado and the 80-mile-per-hour winds out there in Oldham?
Yes. So on, I think it was Monday night, we had quite the storm. We had a tornado come through, and it was, thankfully, just a little power outage. I can deal with a power outage and no damage. But there was some pretty significant damage that blew through Louisville, which definitely tells you it's ready to kick off the Derby week.
That's right. And it is wet today. Today is Wednesday, the 29th. I'm actually getting ready to go to the track because I'm a degenerate as soon as I get done with this podcast to watch some of the races going on today. Weather for the Derby, very cold. Very cold for the Derby. It's going to be about a high of 58. So that's historically kind of on the lower side for the Derby. Might play an effect on some of our picks here. Moving on to my favorite segment of this podcast, other than giving out winners, is favorite horse name. Now, listen, Cindy, I go first in a lot of these, and I don't want to steal your thunder on this. So I'm going to defer to the lady, and I want you to give us a couple of your favorite horse names here. Again, for our listeners, these are not the winners. These are just names that make us happy. So, Cindy, without further ado, what were your favorite horse names out of this field?
So I have by far a big favorite. It's Dannon Bourbon. And for those of listeners, it's actually one of the Japanese trained horses, but it was born and bred here in Kentucky. And it reminds me of so many women my age. We start our morning with a good, healthy yogurt for breakfast, some Dannon yogurt, and then have a splash of bourbon at the end of the day. And so I love the name Dannon Bourbon.
We might be hearing a little bit more about Dan and Bourbon a little bit later from me, but I like that name and I kind of like that horse. For me, how could you have a field with a horse named Right to Party and not call out Right to Party? We know what this horse is about. Don't think Right to Party is going to be a winner here, but a great horse name. And then my second favorite horse name, Full Effort. Again, like would we not we can't be half effort. We can't be going halfway. You're going to know exactly what you get from this horse. He's going to give full effort. Now, does that mean that his effort is the best? Probably not, but I love looking at a horse and being like that guy's trying his hardest. That horse is doing his best.
Those are some good names. I think there's some really good names this year. If you bet strictly on names, you could have some pretty good fun on this.
Yeah,
Now you might not be, coming back with some money, but it'd at least be fun.
that's right. All right. Getting into the race itself, the high drama and high news coming out last week. And one of the reasons that we did not put out a podcast last week is because the field was not finalized yet. And we knew we wanted to do this Derby preview. Uh, but the betting favorite, the heavy betting favorite, Renegade, who's going off 4-1 at the start of the race, drew the inside post. And for those of you who might be unfamiliar with horse racing, because of the size of the field in the Derby, the inside post is a bad draw. A lot of horses collapse down to the inside rail. You can get shuffled back, so much so that it has been since 1986 since a horse has won from the inside post draw. That would be slot number 1. Cindy, do you think this bad draw is going to hurt Renegade's chances in the Derby?
Unfortunately, yes. I really, really liked that horse. Really liked him. And it's not just because he was the favorite. There's a lot. He's his trainer is a world-class trainer. The jockey, it was the perfect setup for a Derby win until they drew the first slot. And that's and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's just the horse can't get out, and he's a closer of a horse, which means when we start talking the horse world, that means that he speeds up at the end. That's where his power comes from, which might still play out, but I'm concerned because he's not going to be able to get himself. I'm concerned he's not going to be able to get himself back a good spot at the beginning. So how about you, Corey? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, the horse's name's Renegade. The jig is up. They finally found him. And I think that this post draw is going to be too hard for him to overcome. I actually do not like Renegade to win this race. And I would say that I have not included him in our trifecta picks, which is what we're going to lead right into. Just to remind everyone in the podcast world, what is a trifecta? Okay, a trifecta is correctly and accurately picking horses that finish 1, 2, and 3 in the Derby. Now, if you're going to bet, if you're going to use one of your apps, or maybe you go to an OTB, what I'm going to tell you to do and what my advice is if you're going to bet a trifecta, you're going to go ahead and box it, which means you're going to bet every combination of those horses that can come in 1, 2, 3. So you're going to bet 1, 2, 3. You're going to bet 3, 2, 1. You're going to bet 2, 1, 3 with all the horses. So you cover all your bases. So if you bet it that way and you get the 3 horses correctly and you box it, you will have a winner there. You will have a winner there. So my secret sauce when I like to pick trifectas is I take a favorite, I take a pretty good horse, and then I take something that's going to juice the odds. And by putting all those together, you get a really good odds because you're picking 3 places. So your odds and your return on investment is going to be higher. So we're going to recommend here a trifecta box, and Cindy and I have different picks, I'm assuming. I will lead off here, number 1, with the horse that I like to win and who is going to be in my trifecta, and that is Commandment. Thou shalt not bet against Commandment. He is the 6th horse. He's a 6-1 favorite right now. That's the horse that I'm putting in my favorite slot in my trifecta. My middle of the road horse that I really like is the Puma. He is the number 9 horse. The Puma's coming off at 10-1 right now. I really like those odds on that horse. He's got a good draw towards the middle of the post, the middle of the track. He's not gonna have to worry about those things that Renegade has to worry about. And then my longer shot that I have in this trifecta is the horse that Cindy loves the name of, a little Dannon in the morning, a little Bourbon in the afternoon. Dannon Bourbon, Japanese horse, is going off 20-1. So if you're going to bet the Corey version of the trifecta box, that's going to be Commandment, Dannon, Bourbon, and the Puma, and the numbers for those horses are the 6, 7, and 9, and I like Commandment to win the Derby. That is my official Empowering Plans pick. Cindy, what do you think?
Right, I think you made some really good picks. We agree on one of them, Commandment. We definitely I like the look of that horse. I like everything that he's I love his trainer is Brad Cox. That's a trainer here out of Louisville. And he's it's a good I think that was a good pick. The other two that I picked Litmus Test. I liked that horse. It's a horse trained by Bob Baffert. He is a longer shot and but I like his position and I think that he has some potential there. And then my last pick is Further Ado. And I think Further Ado is definitely going to be in the top 5. I'm hoping in the top 3 here. And that is also what I like about that horse is everything about behind him. So he has a jockey who was basically his father was a jockey, grew up at the racetrack. He has a really good post position. And I think that he's got a really strong chance to do well.
Excellent. I like all your rationale. Bob Baffert, controversial, greatest of all time horse trainer, of maybe a little infamous around Churchill, coming just a couple years coming off of his suspension there. So let's repeat them back for the audience one more time before we close out of here. The Corey trifecta picks, that is Commandment, Dannon Bourbon, and the Puma. And Cindy, one more time all in a row, your picks are?
I have Commandment, Litmus Test, and Further Ado.
Excellent. There you go. Cindy and I will be sure to not come back on the podcast if neither of us win. But if we do win, you will be hearing from us very soon because I love to take a victory lap and a gloat. This is my favorite podcast of the year, Cindy. I don't know if it's yours or not. I'm going to guess it probably is. It doesn't get any better than healthcare and horse racing. Wish everyone out there that is taking the time out of their day to listen the best of luck in whatever way you want to enjoy the Derby, but enjoy it somehow. It is a great day and a great week to be in the city of Louisville. For Cindy Merrell and all of the Phia group, this is Corey Crigger and the Empowering Plans podcast. Have a great week.
Happy Derby.